Imagine this. You are 5 years old, and hunger has stopped being a feeling that comes and goes. It has become the background noise of your life. You wake up with it. You fall asleep with it. It lives in your throat, in your stomach, in the way your body feels too tired to play the way you used to. You learn way too early that there are different kinds of quiet. There is the quiet of bedtime. And then there is the quiet of an empty kitchen. Picture how a child starts measuring time, not by clocks, but by routines, school days and weekends, mornings and afternoons, lunch trays you see other kids carry, snacks you smell on someone else's breath, the sound of wrappers, the sound of a refrigerator door opening somewhere in another house, the sound of someone else's mother saying, "Eat." Now hold on to the image of a different kind of door, one that stays shut, one that does not open for you, a door that holds what you need, but not what you are allowed to have. A door that teaches you, without words, that some bodies get to be fed and some bodies are expected to endure. This is not a story told for shock. This is not a story told for entertainment. This is a story told because child abuse can hide inside ordinary neighborhoods, behind ordinary walls, and because when the victim is small, the world too often looks away. On this show, we call it what it is. We tell Black women's stories. We tell the stories of Black girls. We tell Black true crime, not because we are fascinated by pain, but because we are tired of silence. This is No Tears for Black Girls, the cases they ignored. I am Samantha Paul. Before we go any further, I need to say this plainly. This episode contains discussion of child neglect, starvation, and the death of a child. If you need to pause, do that. If you need to come back later, come back later. Your nervous system matters more than finishing an episode. This case happened in Baltimore, Maryland. According to a press release from the Office of the State's Attorney for Baltimore City, on October 14, 2024, Baltimore police responded to a residence on the 2200 block of Aiken Street for a report of a 5-year-old child who was unresponsive. The caller found the child, Zona Byrd, lying in a bed on the second floor of the home. Investigators said she was unresponsive and cold to the touch. Medics pronounced her deceased at 12:50 in the afternoon. 5 years old. The kind of age where a child should be losing baby teeth. The kind of age where a child's biggest problems should be spilled juice, a missing toy, a scraped knee that gets kissed and bandaged. Not the kind of age where the end of your life is described in official language, in the flat, clinical phrases of a death investigation. That same press release states that 3 other children were in the home at the time and were transported to Johns Hopkins Medical Center for evaluation. One of them was Zona's 6-year-old brother. Investigators said he appeared emaciated and could barely stand or walk when he was discovered. A 6-year-old who could barely stand. Try to hold that image without turning away from it. Not because you want to suffer, but because the truth demands witnesses. A child's body is designed to grow. It is designed to run, to fall, to get back up, to burn energy, to demand food like it is a birthright. When a 6-year-old can barely stand, that is not a sudden event. That is time. That is a pattern. That is a failure that repeats itself day after day until the body cannot pretend anymore. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner performed an autopsy on Zona Byrd. The state's attorney's office said the autopsy confirmed she weighed only 17.5 pounds. The press release also stated that no evidence was found of physical trauma that could have resulted in her death. 17.5 pounds. If you are not used to thinking in weights, let me translate it into something your mind can hold. That is the weight of a small bag of dog food. That is the weight of a toddler in some families. That is not the weight of a 5-year-old child who should have been beginning kindergarten, learning letters, learning how to write her name, learning songs, learning which crayons make the prettiest purple. That number is not just a statistic, it is a measurement of deprivation. The state's attorney's office described what detectives saw when they found Zona. They said her body appeared severely emaciated and extremely malnourished. They said the clothes she was wearing were much too large for her, and that detectives later reported she had no muscle tone. When you hear that, you might want to push the details away to protect your own heart. But the details are what child abuse depends on. Child abuse survives in vagueness. It survives in the way a community says, "I do not want to judge." It survives in the way adults convince themselves it must not be that bad. But it was that bad. And it was not hidden by poverty alone, not according to the evidence investigators described. In that same press release, prosecutors described what detectives found in the home. They said the kitchen cupboards were completely bare of any food. The freezer was packed with frozen meat. The only item in the refrigerator was a salad. Then detectives checked the second floor and found that the parents had locked their bedroom door and their bedroom closet. When detectives gained access, they found several non-perishable food items locked in the closet, out of the children's reach. Let that land slowly. There was food. There was meat in the freezer. There were non-perishable items in the home. But it was kept behind a locked door, behind a locked closet, away from the children who were starving. This is not a story about empty shelves in a household that had nothing. This is about access being denied. This is about food being treated like power. This is about a home that, according to investigators, contained nourishment that the children could not reach. The state's attorney's office said detectives questioned both parents about the last time Zona was provided food and nourishment. The press release states that neither parent would take responsibility for feeding the child, and neither could account for when they last fed her. What does it mean when two adults cannot account for when they last fed a 5-year-old? Even in messy households, even in overwhelmed households, even in homes where depression and stress swallow the days, parents can usually tell you something. This morning, last night, at dinner, a snack after school, something. But according to prosecutors in this case, neither parent could say. And then another detail surfaced, one that should haunt anyone who has ever worked in a school building, anyone who has ever stood near a cafeteria line, anyone who has ever watched a child linger where food is. The state's attorney's office said detectives later discovered that one of the surviving children was seen going through garbage at school in an attempt to find food. That is not subtle. That is a child doing what bodies do when they are being starved. A child improvising survival. A child trying to solve hunger the only way a child can, with whatever is within reach. And it raises the question that hangs over this entire case like smoke. How long did this go on? Because starvation is not a moment. It is not an impulse. It is not a single decision that lasts for 5 minutes. Starvation is a process. The Baltimore Banner, citing court records and interviews, reported that it takes months for a child to starve to death, and quoted a pediatric expert who said it would be exceedingly rare for a child's neglect to reach a point where they appear gaunt without it taking time. Time that should have offered opportunities for someone to notice, someone to report, someone to intervene. Time that did not save Zona. That same reporting described neighbors who said they barely saw the children and had no idea what was happening inside. A neighbor told reporters that if he had known the children were in danger, he would have fed and protected them. Another neighbor wondered if something was wrong and only understood in hindsight that the signs he dismissed might have meant something. That is how these stories work in real life. People replay ordinary moments after the fact and discover that normal was a costume. They discover that what they assumed was privacy was actually concealment. In the days after Zona's death, reporting from CBS News Baltimore described how the emergency call came to be. According to that reporting and the police report it referenced, Zona's mother, Bernice Byrd, contacted her sister because she was concerned about Zona. The aunt arrived and found Zona in bed, not moving, and cold to the touch. That detail matters because it places a family member at the center of discovery. It is not a passerby, not a stranger. It is someone connected to the household, someone close enough to be called in a moment of crisis. And the police report, as summarized by CBS News Baltimore, said that when questioned, neither parent took responsibility for feeding Zona, and they could not recall the last time she ate. That same reporting described the other children being removed from the home, including the 6-year-old boy who was severely malnourished. The state's attorney's office press release described what happened next at the hospital. It said all of the surviving children were provided food, and that doctors and detectives noted they ate quickly and intently. If you have ever watched a child eat after hunger, you know there is a difference between appetite and urgency. Urgency does not look like picky eating. Urgency looks like a body trying to make up for what it has been denied. And it is not only physical, it is psychological. It is a child learning that food is not guaranteed. So when food appears, you do not trust it to stay. The state's attorney's office said the 6-year-old boy weighed only 35 pounds and remained at Johns Hopkins Hospital until October 26, 2024. That detail matters too. It tells you this was not a quick check and a quick discharge. It tells you his condition required days of care. It tells you the harm was severe enough to need inpatient treatment. Now fast forward to February 26, 2026. According to the Office of the State's Attorney for Baltimore City, Bernice Byrd and Gerald Byrd pleaded guilty to first-degree child abuse resulting in death and first-degree child abuse for their role in starving their 5-year-old daughter, Zona Byrd, and her 6-year-old brother. The press release stated that sentencing is scheduled for June 10, 2026, and that the defendants face a maximum penalty of life, suspending all but 70 years of incarceration. The same press release quoted Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates, who called the facts nauseating and said his heart continued to ache for Zona, who was gone far too soon. He also said the guilty plea ensures the safety of Zona's siblings, who are also victims of their parents' actions. That part matters because people sometimes treat a guilty plea like a technical ending, like a case has closure. But what does closure mean when the victim is 5? There is no closure for a child who was never given the chance to become who she was supposed to be. There is no closure for siblings who carry the memory of hunger and loss. There is no closure for a family line that now has to explain, for decades, why a little girl is missing from every holiday photo that should have included her. The legal system can decide on punishment. It can decide on sentences. But the legal system cannot unmake the months that led up to October 14th, 2024. And as this case gained attention, another painful layer surfaced: the idea that the system had touched this family before. CBS News, Baltimore, and WMAR. 2 News both reported on prior allegations involving the family. According to those reports and the court documents they cited, in November 2019, one of the Byrd's daughters came to school with a black eye. She reported that her parents hurt her because she did not clean her room, and she alleged that her father forced his way into her room and tried to stab her with a knife, then punched and kicked her. The Baltimore Banner reported that the Byrds lost custody at some point and later regained it, and that social workers had stopped visiting the family earlier in the year of 2024, according to a law enforcement officer familiar with the case. WMAR. 2 News reported that state lawmakers questioned what the interactions with Child Protective Services looked like and called for greater transparency, while also explaining that confidentiality laws can limit what agencies release. Those details matter because they move the story beyond a single household and into a larger, harder question. What happens when a family has already been identified as high risk and children still end up dead? That question does not have one simple answer. It is not always a single person failing. It is often a chain of failures. It is a system that depends on reports being made, on reports being taken seriously, on follow-ups happening, on staffing being adequate, on caseworkers not being overloaded, on schools not being afraid to escalate concerns, on neighbors being willing to raise an alarm even if they are not sure, on relatives stepping in early, on courts making decisions that truly protect children instead of prioritizing reunification by default. And it is also, sometimes, a culture of looking away. Because when abuse is happening behind closed doors, the abuser's greatest ally is everyone else's discomfort, our reluctance to get involved, our fear of being wrong, our fear of being seen as judgmental, our fear of being the reason a family gets investigated. But children do not have the luxury of waiting for adults to feel comfortable. A child's body will tell the truth eventually. And when it does, the truth is irreversible. One of the hardest parts of this case is that the evidence described by investigators suggests there were visible signs. A child so malnourished that her ribs were visible, her clothes too large, her muscle tone gone. A sibling so weak he could barely stand. A child searching through garbage at school. Those are not signs that only trained professionals can detect. Those are signs a community can see if a community is paying attention. And this is where I want to say something carefully, because it sits at the heart of this show. Public reporting has not consistently stated Zona Byrd's race, but Baltimore is a majority Black city, and the weight of child welfare failures, under-resourced systems, and public indifference so often lands hardest in Black communities. Even when a child's identity is not fully captured in headlines, the pattern of who gets ignored is not a mystery. In America, some victims are treated like national tragedies, and some are treated like local inconveniences. Some victims get wall-to-wall coverage and candlelight vigils on every channel. Some victims get a short headline, a mugshot, and then silence. And too often, when the suffering is happening in neighborhoods the nation already stereotypes as broken, people hear the city name and stop listening. People hear poverty and stop asking. People hear child neglect and imagine a sad but ordinary failure, not the deliberate withholding of food described in this case. That is why we keep telling these stories. Because ignoring them does not prevent them. It only guarantees the next one. If you are listening to this and you are asking yourself what you could possibly do with information like this, here is the honest truth. Most of the time, you are not going to have access to the full picture. You will not have the police report in your hands. You will not have court documents spread across your table. You will not know what is happening inside a home. But you might notice a child who is always hungry. You might notice a child hoarding food. You might notice a child who looks smaller each month instead of growing. You might notice bruises that do not have a clear explanation. You might notice a child who suddenly disappears from school. You might notice a parent who isolates their children from everyone. And when you notice, you do not have to solve the case. You do not have to investigate. You do not have to confront the person you suspect. You just have to refuse to be part of the silence. Because Zona Byrd was 5 years old. She could not remove herself. She could not drive away. She could not file paperwork. She could not schedule a doctor. She could not unlock the door where the food was kept. She could only endure, and she did, until she could not. As we wait for June 10th, 2026, when Bernice Byrd and Gerald Byrd are scheduled to be sentenced, I want you to hold Zona's name in your mind the way you would hold the name of someone you knew. Not as a headline, not as a statistic, not as a story you heard on a podcast, as a child, a little girl who deserved breakfast, who deserved a full belly, who deserved to grow taller every year, who deserved a life that was measured in birthdays, not in pounds. And before we end, I want to name something else. Zona's case is not isolated. Across the country, there are stories of children living in deprivation so severe it becomes hard to believe. And yet it happens again and again. In some places, the story breaks for a day and then disappears. In other places, it never breaks at all, because no one outside a courtroom ever writes it down. Sometimes the children are found too late. Sometimes they survive, and their bodies and minds spend years repairing what adults did to them. And too often, the communities hit hardest are the ones already carrying the weight of underinvestment, overcrowded systems, and a national media that pays attention only when the story fits a familiar narrative. If you came to this episode looking for a clean ending, there is not one. There is only the reality that a 5-year-old is gone. There is only the reality that siblings have to live with what they saw and what they felt. There is only the reality that a freezer can be full while a child starves, and that the difference between food existing and food being available can be a locked door. And there is only the question that refuses to leave, the question every adult should feel in their chest when they hear this story. Who else knew? Who else saw? And why did nobody get to Zona in time? This is No Tears for Black Girls, the cases they ignored. I am Samantha Paul. If you take nothing else from this episode, take this with you. Child abuse survives in secrecy. It survives behind closed doors, behind polite silence, behind the hesitation to get involved. Protection begins the moment somebody refuses to look away, the moment somebody speaks, the moment somebody interrupts what harm is trying to keep private. Stay loved, stay blessed, stay safe. And remember, whenever you are trapped in a world of darkness, never allow fear to overwhelm you. Believe in your inner spirit and remind yourself of God's first words, "Let there be light."